Betty Goudsmit-Oudkerk was born in 1924 in Amsterdam. Just 9 short years after this was the year that a man named Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Betty's parents, Henriette and Leonard, were keeping a close eye on their neighboring country as Hitler was overtaking Austria and Poland. Then things took a turn for the worse in 1935, when Hitler started putting anti-Jewish decrees into place that made life more and more narrow for Jewish people. Things got much worse in 1941 when Nazi Germany paraded into the Netherlands and started rounding up Jewish people and taking them by force to be either worked to death or murdered in concentration camps all around Europe. It was not until 1945 that the war was completely over. The Holocaust was a very tragic event in history, and millions of innocent people lost their lives. But some survived due to the help of brave souls like Betty Goudsmit-Oudkerk, a true unsung hero.
So when you think of your mother, what is the very first word that comes to your mind?
Strong.
Strong?
When I think of Betty, the first word that comes to my mind is brave. Betty Goudsmit-Oudkerk was part of the Dutch resistance during the Holocaust, putting her safety on the line to save over 600 Jewish infants and small children from being murdered. She was brave when not many people were. She stood out when everyone in the world was trying to be the exact same. Betty Goudsmit-Oudkerk was a true hero, and the word needs to be spread about the amazing impact she made on not only the people she saved, but the ripple effect she had on the entire world. Betty was a true unsung hero, but at the root of her kind and loving heart was a kind and loving home. Come with me as we take a trip back in time to when Betty was just a child and how she grew up. And then we will explore how she made an impact during the Holocaust. And finally, when she grew older, how she was recognized for the amazing acts that she performed. As we travel back to April 2nd in 1924, when this little Dutch girl was born in Amsterdam to the parents Henriette Hamburger-Monnikdam and Leonard Oudkerk. As Betty grew up, she was raised that it is normal to care for others due to all of the warm and loving characteristics that her home was filled with. When she was young, she would care for her baby siblings and her toy dolls as if they were her own children. Aside from her desire and passion to care for people, she was also quite fun to be around and would make jokes and laugh with the many friends that she had, which eventually she was torn away from when the war began. Betty got on well with her parents ever since she had been born. Her father, Leonard Oudkerk, was a kindly-hearted, hard-working man who made a life for his family, managing and running a business in Amsterdam's Van Woestraat that was working out quite well for him. The Oudkerk family lived on one of the busiest streets in Amsterdam. Betty's mother, Henriette Hamburger-Monnikdam, was a specialist in music education, and she was a great mother to Betty and the 4 other children who lived with their parents above the factory that Leonard managed. In 1940, when Betty was only 16 years old, her father passed away of a sudden brain hemorrhage. Betty had always been very close with her father, and his passing was extremely hard on her, and she continued to commemorate his death up until the end of her life. Gerrit, Noel, Lenny, Betty, and Jap were all of the children of the Oudkerk family, and eventually only Betty, Lenny, and Jap made it out of the Holocaust alive. Now, going forward to when the Holocaust first began, Betty had made many friends, including Sienny Kattenberg at the housekeeping school that she was attending. Soon, Betty's life took a drastic turn on May 10th of 1940 when Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. Not long after, at the young age of 17 years old, her world was turned upside down. Then she could no longer attend the school because of the anti-Jewish decrees that were being put into place. Betty was then asked to work at the crèche, where all babies and children were allowed until September 15th of 1941. After this date, the only people that were allowed into the crèche were Jewish babies, children, and workers. At first, Betty loved it at the crèche, caring for the children, playing the piano, singing, undertaking crafts and activities, all while following a 2-year training course. In October of 1942, the crèche was affiliated to the Holländische Schouwburg, making it part of a deportation apparatus. Life in the crèche became very difficult for Betty at the age of 18. She was dealing with how she felt about all of the children and how they were impacted, being separated from their parents and more than likely never seeing them again. What took place there made a heavy impression on her. Considering the circumstances, Betty was still very much enjoying her job working with children and being a part of something. It was not until later in that year when she was approached by Walter Susskind and Henry Pimentel to help smuggle children out of the crèche. As these two very brave people invited Betty into their office, she saw a small briefcase, and placed inside was a newborn baby who was fast asleep. And just then, Betty knew exactly what she had to do. Betty was one of this group. Putting her own life at risk, she made sure that several children reached safety, and eventually most of the children would end up with a fresh start at life, with a new family, which does not seem ideal considering that they were ripped away from their original family, but it was better than the children being orphaned, or even worse, slaughtered by Nazis. Betty knew exactly what the consequences would be for what she was doing, but she refused to let her fear get in the way of her helping many children who were not able to help themselves. The night of September 28th in 1943 was the last night that the children at the crèche slept in peace. This was the night of the last Jewish roundup, and that meant that she would now have to start taking care of herself and making sure that she was safe. This also marked the start of her long period of hiding until the war was over. As she was hiding, she could not help but think about all of the individual children she could not save, and this feeling stuck with her right up until the day that she passed. After the war had subsided, Betty worked at the Benengestus Hospital and then for the foundation Berg Stitching, which cared for Jewish orphans whose parents had been murdered during the war. She then married Bram Goudsmit, who had lost his entire family, similar to what Betty had gone through. After emerging from complete isolation, she managed to build a family and live a happy life. It was not long after this that Jap, Lenny, and Betty had regained their parents' land back due to the restoration of rights process. This played a huge part in Bram's very successful real estate business due to Betty's involvement. But despite her new normal life, she also was long recognized for her acts of bravery and kindness. She was awarded the Honorable B'nai B'rith Certificate Jewish Rescuers citation. Betty also got to witness the grand opening of the Anne Frank House. It was not until much later in the year 2012 before she opened up to her children about the Holocaust, what she experienced, and how she felt about it. Another fact about Betty, along with lots of other people who come from a Jewish background, is that the 4th of May is a day that we remember all of the innocent souls that were brutally murdered during World War II. Betty's amazing acts of bravery were not recognized in full until she passed away in 2020. When the word got out, Betty's family members were getting over 1,000 letters from people all over the world. There were many impacts that she left for this world, but one very important impact she left was the trauma that she went through, and it is carried through the generations below her. As stated by her daughter Judith, this is what war can do, and this is what war does. Betty's endless impact on the world is to be brave even when you are terrified. Today, we traveled back in time to when an amazing hero was born, how she helped in the Holocaust, and lastly, about how Betty Goudsmit-Oudkerk left a lasting impact and ripple effect on not only her family, but the entire world. The world today needs more kind hearts that are willing to lend a hand just to help, and that expect nothing in return.